All right, welcome everybody to this winter forecast for 2024, 2025 rather. And it's going to be a brief and blunt to the point update because this winter can either go two ways. It can either go, well, I'm just going to be blunt, it can be very cold or it can be very warm. And I've went over, I'll review it again in this video of why I think there's a potential for each way it can turn. And I'll get to that in a second. But first, let me just outline what I think is going to happen. You know, with a La Nina, you tend to get your jet stream favoring um, colder conditions for the Northeast and for the upper Midwest because that's just um, the jet stream undercuts that area and it allows a lot of cold air to be reinforced. But again, that jet stream is like a big, fast moving air jet in the upper layers of the atmosphere. So, in other words, when the cold air tries to dive south of that, it doesn't go south of that because it just catches along the jet stream and goes eastward. So, due to that being said, I think the coldest area of this winter will be here in the blue. Again, because that's where the La Nina will favor the cold. I think it'll be snowy too. Um, I think the biggest thing this year, it's really hard to say, but I would say that this will be a big lake effect year. But here, I'll get into the point of why I think this winter is very hard to predict. The La Nina, we're gonna have a La Nina this year, and La Ninas typically favor the northern half of the country to be colder and snowier. But we have a lot of warm waters in the Atlantic Ocean and in the Pacific Ocean. I mean, a very unusually expansive area of warm waters. So, due to that, and due to a couple models that I'll show you in a second, I think this winter overall will be warm and mild for much of the country, not the whole country, but places like especially the southeast. I think you'll see warmer and drier than normal conditions. I do think the Northwest will be snowy. I just don't know how cold it's going to be. You see, if you take a look at the NOAA's 8 to 14 day temperature outlook, they have it very warm in the West. So, again, a hard winter to predict. It's kind of all over the place in terms of the information out there, even on the modeling sites. Um, but I think cold and snowy is a good bet for the Great Lakes. And just to prove that kind of, the European weekly model is showing a lot of lake effect snow for many areas. And for example, I believe Cleveland, um, which isn't typically a snowbelt area, so this is like a very low estimate of what the snowbelts will get. So Cleveland was forecasted around 18 inches by December 9th on one of the European, long range models. So that's not counting the current lake effect snow outbreak that we're going to have in the next 3 to 4 days, which is going to drop 3 feet of snow on many locations, especially near Buffalo and Erie, Pennsylvania, and Oswego, New York. But what I'm saying is, Cleveland is only supposed to get about 6 inches from this, maybe a little more. So if they're forecasting 18 inches to fall just for the Cleveland snowbelt. So if you go north of that and northeast in the typical snowbelts, you're probably going to have a hefty amount of snowfall from now until January 9th. So I do believe to kick off to kick off this year, we will see a lot of lake effect snow outbreaks and potentially a lot of clippers too, which will aid with the lake effect snow. So that's the first part of winter. Now, again, with the Northwest mild but snowy, it was kind of tempting. I didn't know, whether I should have put this mild or cold and snowy, but the bottom line is I believe the Northwest will be snowy along with the whole northern tier of the country because that's what the La Nina will do. That's what a typical La Nina does. And a typical La Nina also brings warmer and drier than normal conditions to the southeast. Now, there are certain exceptions, like during the winter of 2010 and 2011, we saw that big, massive La Nina, and it produced basically a cold and snowy winter for the East Coast and Mid Atlantic, not so much the northern plains and the Midwest and the Great Lakes. It did, but it was much more dramatic in the Mid Atlantic. So I'm gonna after showing you that map, just take it in one more time. That's my forecast for this winter. I'm gonna show you some other maps that I would like to show you. And I might have to exit out of these. Hold on one second. Let's see, USA Blink. Yeah. Okay, here we go. So again, here's the PNA forecast. Give me one second. Thank you. And it's positive, which again indicates a lot of warmth for the West and basically 1/3 of the country, the places like California, Nevada, even as far as Colorado. And it's forecasted to remain positive for the next 2 weeks. So that would imply more warmth for the West, which is exactly what NOAA is forecasting in the next 2 weeks. And so yeah, this PNA, if it were to stay positive for the majority of winter, that would pretty much be game set match for a warm winter in the West. I do want to look at the NAO, which is a different teleconnection, but it forecasts the weather on the eastern half of the USA. When it's negative, you tend to get a lot of snow and cold with that, big snowstorms. And when it's positive, that's usually when it's more tranquil and mild during the winters of the eastern portion of the USA, especially the Northeast and Great Lakes. But again, the NAO was negative for a few weeks, and I believe that's why we got so cold, and we're getting still cold weather, because it's kind of a delayed effect in weather physically. So when you get a negative NAO, you might see the feedback off that occurring a couple days in front of it. So but yeah, the NAO has been negative since November 15th. It's still negative. Expected to go positive in about 4 days from now. So and that's actually when it starts to get a little bit warmer in the Northeast, but not like a blowtorch type of warm. I also want to show you what a typical La Nina does for winter, and we're going to take a look at this image. So here's a La Nina pattern, typical setup. You have your jet stream right south of the northern plains, cutting through the Midwest, right below the Great Lakes and Northeast, interior New England, and even coastal New England. And then you have your moisture feed from the Pacific into the Northwest. And because you have the high pressure directing all the moisture into the jet stream. And then when you get the combination of the cold and the moisture, this is where you tend to get a lot of snow. So that's why I think places like Michigan this year will be snowy, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Pennsylvania, New York, Maine, all these areas. And again, I think a lot of this will be lake effect snow, at least to start. So now we're going to kind of close off with a look at one of the most accurate models out there, which is the European model, and we're going to take a look at I am going to go to weatherbell.com for that, because I thought I saved that, but I can't find it. So let's take a look at Weatherbell. And again, I've rarely seen a winter where models are this diverse. But let's take a look at the European seasonal. We're going to take a look at our temperature outlook, just to give you a more realistic approach, because I think the Euro is the most accurate. So I know you could probably see a lot of people posting like the Canadian model, which is forecasting a somewhat of a cold winter, and other models are predicting a cold winter. But just to be on the real side and safe side, I'm going with the Euro because it's traditionally known as the most accurate model.